artificial intelligence will completely transform our world. But what is AI? Why will it affect you? And how can you and your business survive and thrive through the AI revolution? Welcome to AI and You. Here is your host, author, speaker, and futurist, Peter Scott.
Hi, welcome to episode 293. I am talking with José Antonio Bowen and C. Edward Watson about AI in post-secondary education because they are the authors of the new book, Teaching with AI, a practical guide to a new era of human learning. José is leader of the Bowen Innovation Group, consulting on innovation in higher education, and was the 11th president of Goucher College. He has held leadership roles at Stanford, the University of Southampton, Georgetown, Miami University, and Southern Methodist University. And his book, Teaching Naked, reshaped conversations about technology and pedagogy. He is an international jazz pianist and edited the Cambridge Companion to Conducting. Eddie Watson is Vice President for Digital Innovation at the American Association of Colleges and Universities and is the founding director of their Institute on AI, Pedagogy, and the Curriculum. He directed the Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of Georgia and is a fellow of the Louise McBee Institute of Higher Education. Last week, we talked about how students and teachers are reacting to AI, threats to jobs, particularly teaching jobs, and changes to how we work. What really matters in the practice of teaching in an AI world? Cheating, changes to relationships between teachers and students, and the importance of caring. This week, we're going to talk about the future of textbooks, José and Eddie's meta-analysis of AI literacy frameworks and standardizing AI literacy training, the evolution of teaching models and practices like lectures, and the future of degrees themselves. So let's get back into the interview with José Antonio Bowen and Eddie Watson. The limited amount of time forces me to pivot here and to the topic of what's the importance of teaching AI literacy to students? What should a program like that be? Eddie, if you could take this one. So what would the length of study, type of study, depth of teaching students about AI literacy, not just using them, but entering a world that's being reshaped by AI, understanding the issues that they will have to deal with in so many professions and sectors like ethics, the changing workplace requirements, environmental impact, all the way to existential risk. What should AI literacy education for students look like?
Well, I think you touched on a lot of the pieces there and a lot of the motivation for why we should be teaching our students this. I mean, the world beyond the academy, when you graduate, whether it's from high school or college, you're going to enter a world where there's going to be likely job expectations where you'll have some competency with AI. And it's going to vary from one discipline to the next or even one business to the next within the same field. But that's definitely happening and definitely increasing. And this doesn't mean that every college or university class needs to be teaching AI literacy, but I would argue that for every campus, someone should. That this has become essential learning for college students. And just like we would hope or aspire that our students would leave college with some quantitative reasoning skills, some ethical reasoning skills, writing skills, critical thinking, I think AI has now entered that list, partially driven by the demands of the world of work, but also just beyond that sphere. AI is present in lots of different aspects of our lives now. So you asked the question specifically about what would be in that curriculum or what might we teach. So in the new book, José and I did a meta-analysis of the variety of different AI literacy frameworks that have appeared out there on the landscape. UNESCO has one. There's one from Stanford. Barnard College has one. University of Canterbury, Open University. There's 3 or 4 others that we looked at. And then we kind of we resisted the inclination to create like a hard and fast framework. But we kind of came up with a meta-analysis of those AI literacy models and what were the commonalities and what might we then teach? What are some of those pieces? And I think you touched on many of them. I mean, part of it is a mindset that we aren't going to turn over work per se to AI, but AI might do the work with us, but we have to make the executive decision. In other words, we need to bring our expertise and our humanity to every line of code or every sentence written by AI and make final decisions regarding what we might move forward in terms of turning in an assignment or out in the world of work. But ultimately, to be a good user of AI, it provides significant oversight. You check everything that it has provided you. You look for bias, you look for inaccuracies. You think about tone and voice and audience as you might further craft text produced by AI. So that's just sort of like within the writing domain. And then there are courses in philosophy that have emerged that teach about ethics and morals and best practice around AI without ever using AI at all throughout that class, because there are a lot of larger concerns that might drive some of our decision making going forward. And of course, there's understanding the variety of different tools that are out there and prompt engineering and how you might get the best response out of AI and why you might use one tool over another and all of those sorts of things. So that's what I would call a generic or generalized AI literacy. But then there's some very specific things that are emerging within different disciplines, specific tools, specific models that are really only being used by, say, the field of law or a sub-genre within the world of medicine. And so if you're teaching nurses or philosophers or physicists, probably near the end of that curriculum, maybe in those capstone courses or those last semester courses, some things that are very specific to your discipline that your students are likely to see when they graduate. And many institutions, especially regional institutions, have a really good sense of where most of their graduates go. If Bowen is in your backyard, you might be producing a lot of engineers that go to work at Bowen. It's a good opportunity then to maybe reach out to Bowen and ask, how is AI being used in the world of work? Where do you project down the road for a year? And that should influence the curriculum that we build. So I thought there's some common notions regarding AI literacy that we might incorporate into the curriculum. But there's almost like two AI literacies. One that's sort of a broader, generic, that could be applied in lots of different settings. And then there's those that are very specific to the field or discipline that a student might be in.
So to put you on the hot seat for a moment, at a very much ground level, if you're tasked with designing the AI literacy course for undergraduates, and that spans the things that you've been talking about, what does that look like in terms of number of units? What's mandatory? What do you think is best to make mandatory and elective? What would it look like?
I would say that probably the institution's mission and goals would help define that a bit. Like if you are a small liberal arts school that has a real focus on the environment or other specific, like your identity is this, well, then what does AI look within that context? So if you're in Ohio State, that might look different than, say, if you're Berry College. They're two very different institutions, two different regions within the U.S. So how many hours should be spent? It would kind of depend on what should be contained within that curriculum. And I think sort of what your larger mission of your institution might be, what you hope your students would accomplish, where they're going to go in careers. But, in a generic AI literacy course, I don't know that that is necessarily the best model. Like I think there's maybe 3 points in the curriculum at least that students should have touch points with AI literacy. So maybe it's more like a spiral curriculum where it shows up in multiple places, maybe with increasing complexity across the span of the academic career. Like for instance, I think when students first enter college, there should be some AI literacy provided to them. And that might be more in the terms of a module or one credit course that's mostly about college success. Like here's how not to get in trouble. Here's how to make sure that you're using it well within an academic setting. But it's not projecting to post-graduation. It's projecting into you just got to college. So how do you be successful within our context? What are the rules, guidelines, who you should talk to, what you should look for on syllabi, and here's some generalized skills. Then maybe some sense of applying AI literacy within the gen ed curriculum. Maybe it's not necessarily a standalone course in AI literacy, but maybe it shows up in 2 or 3 places within the gen ed curriculum. Like there's a course in the humanities that has a focus on certain aspects of, well, number one, the humanities, but also AI literacy within that curriculum. And then within the major near the end of the curriculum. So again, it's going to vary a bit from one place or the other, but probably the best way to teach almost anything isn't just to have that one course that stands off by itself and it's like, I checked that box, now I've done that, I'll never have to think about AI literacy or written communication ever again, whatever it might be, but rather show its importance in multiple different contexts and probably an interdisciplinary approach that has these touch points across multiple courses makes the most sense.
And we've had this, by the way, with critical thinking, writing, technology, digital literacy, right? We've thought about this before, and most places don't just say, well, we have a critical thinking course, and then nobody else has to teach it, right? We wouldn't do that. And even writing, right? The model of a freshman writing course hasn't really worked that well. Lots of places now have a writing across the curriculum, right? I have to teach you how to write in the discipline. So I might have an introductory course in the English department, but writing in the discipline, writing across the curriculum. Other places where there is writing, a senior thesis, has worked better than just saying, okay, take your one course as a freshman and then now you're a writer.
It does seem, though, at least at this early stage, where the standards and norms for using AI have not been established very well, that there's a great utility in teaching something that all students understand as the basis for how AI should and shouldn't be used across all of the courses, because so many of them will have that interaction with AI. And for every professor to be developing and teaching their own approach to that seems a big waste, no?
I don't think you need, for example, a whole course in AI literacy for all the freshmen. Yeah, having a unit where everybody learns, okay, we're going to make sure that everybody knows that there are multiple models, that there's the big three, there's also Grok. On our website, We Teach with AI, you can see there are dozens of cultural models, models that speak different languages, models that look at the world differently, models that are only trained on Black and brown people. So, okay, I should know a little bit about models, a little bit about prompting, introduce a couple of other topics. But then different teachers are going to have different responses to when is AI use appropriate. In the same way that a calculator, right? The question the calculator forces us to answer is not just, should I ban calculators? The same is true for the spreadsheet. The real question is, when do I introduce it and how do I have students use it? So I might say, okay, you're not going to use the calculator in the second grade, but we will in the fifth grade. We'll use it for calculus. We'll use a spreadsheet to do this, but not for that, because you need to learn to do this by hand, right? So the pedagogical questions that AI asks are going to be different depending on what level, whether your kids are, what stage they're at, what discipline they're in, what they hope to do when they graduate. And so not everybody learns as much long division as they used to because the calculator changed that. We still teach it, but we teach it for different reasons. We teach it to understand estimation and how the concept works. But I no longer need to be facile in long division to be a doctor as I used to.
To what extent should the sector standardize some of this so that expectations can be set across the realm of post-secondary education? Does that mean that there's benefit to standardizing what AI Literacy 101 contains so that you could have the same degree of uniform expectations or expectations of uniformity of that as you would for, say, Calculus 101?
Well, we might have different answers. My answer is no, because it's too soon. We don't even have a standard course in Psych 101, right? We allow different institutions to teach it differently because there are different kinds of programs. Now, there are probably some similar outcomes that we want to say, but I think at the moment we should have experimentation, right? Because I want to know, do your graduates end up having more useful skills than mine? What are the types of skills? How did we teach them? I think it's very early. There's a lot of flux. So I would recommend that we start experiments, right? We should all be doing some sort of AI literacy, but we should now be doing research on which things were most useful, which things were effective. How do we teach those things? We have a lot of work to do, I think, before we standardize.
Eddie?
I think there's guidance. I mean, our book provides some real clear guidance, sort of like the best thought from the best models and what does that kind of look like. But as that to be like a standardized curriculum, I agree with Jose that there's a lot that continues to change. Like I'm sure when the third edition of our book comes out, we're going to have a different perspective on what AI literacy is because the technologies have changed, the world has changed, the view of best practice and ethics around AI will have evolved. So that's all going to influence that a bit. But we are seeing some guidance coming from the professional associations. You are seeing some things very specific about just in terms of cheating and academic integrity, but also what does it really look like? And I think within specific fields, what AI literacy looks like, that's the most logical place that we should see such things evolve. Like, in other words, if you're going to be a psychology major, seems like APA ought to be bringing the best minds together to think about what AI literacy means within that specific field and the set of jobs and positions that people eventually go and get. But I mean, we're seeing this already from a little bit from MLA, a little bit from, there's a public health professional association that's providing guidance. So I think we can anticipate more of that as time unfolds, but that's probably who should be doing the work. I mean, the definition of AI literacy for an engineer will be very different than what AI literacy looks like, say, for a sociologist.
Do you think the traditional labeling and distinctions of degrees, like there's a psych degree, there's a degree in medieval history or whatever, do you think that those labels are going to survive, or will they mutate?
Yeah, they've survived a lot of other things. Again, disciplines are two things. One is they are bodies of content, but the other is they are ways of thinking, right? Anthropologists and historians think differently, even sometimes about the same subject. And discipline is an important word there because, right, discipline is both useful, but also limiting. So I think disciplines will remain, and it's hard to be interdisciplinary if you don't also have a discipline. So I'm a very interdisciplinary person, but I still think in the disciplines in which I was trained. So I think those will remain. I will say, though, that your major has never mattered less. That's been true, I think, for the whole of the century, that the ability to adapt and change. Yeah, computer science degree, right? A degree in the iPhone 1 is not that useful once you get iterations. You have to be able to adapt. And so a computer scientist can't keep up. I can't teach you everything you're going to need to know now because knowledge is always changing. And so I can teach you a way to think about the world in a discipline, but I think that picking that discipline has never mattered less. I think students need to be adaptable. So study things that are interesting to you, but everybody needs to know how to write, how to communicate, and critical thinking. But now I think also AI, the ability to use AI, which will be very discipline specific. A financial analyst is going to use AI to do background research. A chemist is going to use it to do a lit review. You can go to Edison Research or Future House and now figure out, has anyone ever done an experiment like this? That's a new capability that we need to be able to use. AI can search for ideas in ways that Google and humans could not do before. So I would add that to the AI literacy. Exactly what that means will differ, but the ability to search for ideas, the ability to get new feedback from somebody who disagrees with you, those are new capabilities that we should be exposing students to.
To take that in another direction, what do you think the future of textbooks is here? It seems to me that would be on the wane, in that now I could simply say, hey, ChatGPT, give me a Physics 101 lesson on conservation of momentum, and get something that's precisely tuned to my comprehension and interests. And that big, fat, unreasonably expensive textbook, which would have sentences in that I didn't understand but couldn't get the explanation of because you can't argue with or question a textbook, seems like an anachronism, and maybe in some perverse sense, good riddance. But what's your feeling about this?
You said about the future. What's the present of textbooks?
Okay.
I think they've been on the way out for a long time. Eddie?
No, I agree. I mean, we saw a sort of a bit of an arc of transition beginning around open educational resources and those fully open, free textbook options. OpenStax from Rice University is certainly one of the leaders within that domain. But I even wonder about the sustainability of OpenStax whenever you have tools available to students and faculty where they could indeed, in seconds, create a book chapter on a specific topic or a specific interdisciplinary topic, that maybe in the past you've got 7 textbook options from the publishers out there. And it's like, well, this is closest to my conception of this discipline. But I also, a lot of my students are interested in the environment. I would rather have a textbook that had environmental examples or examples from Southwest Texas where my college is or whatever it might be. The customization is quite astonishing, but I think there is a role for the faculty member, right? In that you might ask AI to produce a chapter or an entire textbook but the work's not done. There's probably weeks or maybe even months of work still involved by the faculty member to read the whole thing, make their own edits, double check sources and content, and make sure that it is indeed accurate. So it's kind of free like a puppy, right? There's a lot of work associated in creating a free chapter or a free textbook before you'd want to give it to your students.
So, and there's another sort of way this could work, right? One is I curate sources, right? Notebook LM is a great way to do this, by the way. Now, when I moved from the US to England, I was told, textbooks, can't use textbooks, right? And so I was told I had to give students more original sources. This was in the 90s. So no textbooks, but also you could give them multiple options to choose from, which my students hated because it's like, well, which one is the right answer, of course. But now I could put multiple sources into Notebook LM. Since I curate the sources of knowledge, but students would then decide, I want it with baseball analogies. I want it in Chinese. I want it in Spanish. I want it pitched to me with anime characters, right? And there's the format in which I get it can now be customized by the student for the student. And so exactly what those roles look like and what that interface looks like, I think is changing pretty rapidly. But if you want a glimpse of that, load a couple of sources in a topic that you understand into Notebook LM, and then ask it to make a podcast at different levels of depth in different languages with different sets of analogies, and then have a conversation with it, all of which is now possible. And so I think the standard fixed generic textbook is going to face the same pressure that generic greeting cards or generic birthday cards or even generic bedtime stories are now going to face. Doesn't mean we won't ever have generic birthday cards anymore, but it means there's now a competition, which is a customized print-on-demand card that's just for Peter and his fetish for ukuleles and parrots, and with a picture of us together in Paris that was created from Facebook, right? There's now going to be this whole other industry, and that's already happened. TouchNote already does that.
You got the parrot part right, incidentally, although you whiffed on the ukulele. I agree with all of that. I do wonder what the future holds if writing textbooks becomes uneconomic and pointless. Then what will we be training the AI models on in the future? A different conversation. I wanted to ask you something. I represent a lot of high schools, and there is considerable anxiety around how to prepare students for universities that seem to be in very different places and unable to make up their minds about what the admission requirements are, for instance, in an AI world, or how to conduct that. From your perspective, what could you say to them about how that might be changing?
Well, there are definitely some changes that we're seeing. I mean, where I live, Virginia Tech is the closest university, and they changed the readership of student essays to apply to college. There's now AI is being used. It used to be 2 human readers, as I understand it. Now there's 1 human reader. And
sorry, the listeners don't see that Eddie made a hand gesture that his Zoom interpreted as put a whole bunch of balloons floating up to the ceiling. Sorry, interruption. Go on.
The celebration there. Now I forgot where it was. Admissions, yeah. So instead of there being 2 human readers, there's now 1 AI reader and 1 human reader. So I guess there's some level of inter-rater reliability that I'm sure that they're exercising as a part of that. But that's showing that there's a shift. And another university I was at recently, one specific program, they were leveraging AI to read grad school personal statements, applications to grad school to personal statements. So there's definitely shifts in these processes. I think universities are looking for efficiencies as well as to be able to get back to students more quickly and maybe even save money as part of the process. So these processes are indeed shifting, and I have heard of universities using AI detection tools to scan student essays as they're submitted as well. So I don't think that's a good practice. I think it's diminishing. It sort of had a little flurry there for a while. I think many have moved back from it because of the AI detection issues. But that world, that domain is indeed evolving. So I think just making students aware that, hey, depending on the university you might apply to, they might be using AI detection. You don't know necessarily. It might not be transparent about that. So it's best that you do the work yourself in the application that you might submit. But there might also be ways to leverage AI that wouldn't necessarily be text production. you have your essay and, a university has a specific identity, ask it AI to review your essay and provide you with feedback. How could I make this essay more palatable to those that are in the electrical engineering program at Georgia Tech? Those kinds of feedback elements that I then make, or I as the student might make all of the changes. But there's ways to leverage AI in the process to maybe improve the quality of the work, but probably students should be careful about understanding how the admissions processes are changing and how tools might be used as part of that process.
And remember, this is also in response to your textbook question, right? You've asked us a lot of questions today about what could happen. That's not the same as what should happen. Your question about textbooks, right? That in fact, if we stop having textbooks and we stop producing written knowledge by humans, that does become a problem. So what should happen is very different than what could happen or what will happen. And I think what will happen is that we've had this problem with textbooks for years. Students have not been buying textbooks, especially those expensive, for years. That's been the problem, that only a certain numbers of students have, and those tend to be the wealthier students. And so there's been an equity problem that AI could now maybe help us with, but not having textbook is just something that's happened.
Well, talking about what should happen is a great segue to a final question here. Let's take a trip into the future. 5 years, 10 years, whatever period in your mind constitutes enough to be in an era where we're experiencing the transformation of education that's possible and desirable with AI. From a 100,000-foot level, which might be as close as we could get to looking at what that might be, what does the future of the role of the student and the teacher in education look like in there? What would you like to see?
For me, I'd like to see it built upon what we empirically know about how human learning works. And there are ways that AI can assist that, and there's ways that AI could disrupt that. I feel like that should be our guiding model. The research, really good research, is only beginning to emerge. I mean, there's not a lot of studies that are really out there regarding specific practices, but as time passes, there's going to be more and more of that, and we're going to see certain things kind of emerge, like around AI tutors. There's some interesting research that's emerged from Harvard that suggests that using AI tutors in concert with some well-designed active learning activities can actually accelerate learning. So those kinds of studies, one study doesn't answer a research question in its entirety by any means. But I guess for me, that's what I think should drive us. We should think about what is it we're trying to accomplish, which is really student achievement of specific learning outcomes, and also helping students stay in school, matriculate on time, all of those good things toward graduation. Well, how might we leverage AI in service to those kinds of goals? That's the future that I'd like to see.
So I listened to a podcast the other day about the transition from horses to cars. And the stat that stuck out was that in the 1890s, there were 4,000 carriage makers in the United States. 4,000. People who made wheels and straps and saddles. And how many of them survived into the car industry? One, Studebaker. And those carriage makers thought of themselves as artisans, and that made it hard for them to think about transitioning to this new, more factory model. So what I think should happen is that while we think of ourselves as artisans, right, we also don't want to go extinct. AI is going to happen whether we like it or not. And it does create opportunities to have different types of systems, more equity in some places. And so we should use this as an opportunity to think, how could we educate more people better? As Eddie says, we got lots of research on this now, but different people, different types of populations want different things. Some people want online. We have all of those older learners who didn't finish a degree. We already have Silicon Valley High School with its dogs as teachers. That's all AI delivered, right? That's a good thing. Not because I think all the teachers should be AI dogs, but because it's variety. For some students, that's an opportunity that they don't have local teachers who can do something. I got a call from someone in Iran who's trying to figure out how to use AI to help students in regions, this is K through 12, where there is no teacher who specializes in what they want to do because they're in a little village. Well, AI does have opportunities there to help that student who wants to learn this discipline, and there is no human there who can help them learn that. So I'd like us to be open to the variety of possibilities, because I think what we'll end up with in 10 years is a much more diverse system where we have some totally face-to-face, some AI-assisted. Maybe it's different for rural and for urban. Maybe people are coming to classes once a week physically and then studying online or doing internship, right? I think there are other kinds of models, and we've resisted that for a long time in education. I think it's going to be much harder to do that. And I think if we turn around and embrace that and say, how could we better educate, and where do human relationships matter the most? Because we know that they matter for learning. Trust relationships matter. But giving a lecture for 50 minutes is not always the best way to do that. And so where do relationships, how do we use AI to do the things it can do well, to figure out what we need to do face-to-face and with human warmth and dignity?
And just to tuck in a lower level question there in response to that I have to get in, do you see that putting pressure on the four-year degree, the bachelor's as the credential, and moving towards micro-credentials, for instance?
I think that's an and.
Mm-hmm.
I think people will still value, because the four-year degree is about more than just discipline. It's about a maturity and things hanging together. So yeah, there'll be some pressure there. And yes, there will be more micro-credentials and there'll be alternative credentials. And at the moment, right, the pressures are all against four-year degrees, the demographic cliff, public sentiment, et cetera. So yeah, add this to that, but I don't think all of that is going to be enough to eliminate it.
All right. Well, our time has run out. Thank you so much. What would you like to tell our listeners about how they can find you, any other projects you've got on the boil, and what's important for them to know about you?
Well, I'll start with, I work at the American Association of Colleges and Universities, and we have an array of programming that we've designed to help campuses and individual faculty make movement in this space around AI. So we have an institute on AI, pedagogy, and the curriculum. And campus teams of 5 or more can apply to attend this institute. It takes place during the academic year. It's all done virtually, so there's no travel expense associated with it. But we provide every campus team with a national expert in AI and higher education to be their partner as they first design an action plan over the first month, and then enact that plan on their campus, whether it's around curriculum integration or AI literacy or policies or academic integrity. You, the campus, you decide what it is you hope to accomplish, and we'll help you get there. Jose and I also do every semester a Teaching with AI workshop series, a 4-part series with AAC&U. So you can just go to aacu.org to learn more about both of these programmings and more.
Fantastic.
We also have, right, obviously the book Teaching with AI is available, and our new website, We Teach with AI, which has all sorts of resources on it for teachers.
Terrific. The book there is Teaching with AI, A Practical Guide to a New Era of Human Learning by Jose Antonio Bowen and Eddie Watson, writing under the nom de plume of C. Edward Watson. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on AI and You.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And that's the end of the interview. We are focusing so much on AI in education because it's really the pointy end of the biggest changes that AI is wreaking upon what it means to be human and where we need to get this right now. And I'm so grateful to people like Jose and Eddie for tackling that with such energy and commitment. In today's news ripped from the headlines about AI, the video editing company Capwing just published research on AI-generated content, finding that over 20% of videos shown to new YouTube users are AI slop. In other words, low-quality, auto-generated clickbait, as opposed to quality videos with AI assistance. Researchers created a new YouTube account and found 21% of the first 500 recommended videos pushed by the platform's algorithm fell into that category. South Korea led slop viewership at 8.45 billion views, followed by Pakistan, 5.34 billion, and the US, 3.39 billion, with channels from Spain earning the most subscribers. Oh, great. The fact that this is entirely predictable doesn't make it any less annoying, and I did predict it before ChatGPT arrived, saying that the marginal value of content is trending towards zero. This will become untenable at some point as we become awash in content, but as long as it's still monetizable, the slop will continue to accelerate. And that'll actually be one of the themes next week when we'll have a special episode talking about the future of work. where I put on the futurist hat and analyze trends, like the one I was just talking about, to see what we can figure out about where we're going with jobs. That's next week on AI and You. Until then, remember, no matter how much computers learn how to do, it's how we come together as humans that matters.
That's all for this episode of AI and You. Please leave a rating and comment and share with your friends. Get the book Artificial Intelligence and You and see more videos and articles at aiandyou.net. That's aiandyou.net, where you can also send us your questions. Thank you for listening.